This morning we have a special guest.
Yes, we do.
Spring birds.
Spring birds. Spring is sprung. It's nice for a background.
It is.
We say that as we sit here and hear it through the window.
All right, we're going to pause this recording and listen to it. We'll be right back, folks, just to make sure.
Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations. Okay, we're back.
Nice. Good to be back.
We listened to it, and we think it's okay.
Yeah.
But you can always leave a comment and let us know the birds were too much. They were extra. Too extra.
They were distracting.
Yeah.
If you thought so.
Yes. Let us know.
Or if they were encouraging. Feel free to let us know that too.
I don't know that we can guarantee the background every week.
That's true. That's true.
But we can.
There is a season. Wasn't that by the birds?
There's a season,
yes. There is a season.
Right now, the season is perfect because we got the window open.
Yep.
And it's, early morning, and it's just beautiful.
Yes, indeed.
Temperature's beautiful. The birds are beautiful.
It's good to be out.
It is. I've been thinking about this, Mark.
What you been thinking about?
When we get to the summer months.
Yeah? Where are we going?
It's going to be hot.
Oh.
And then I'm going to have to run that thing. Air conditioner.
The air conditioner.
So get ready, folks.
Well, we can adapt, maybe.
We might be loud. Yeah.
We might have to adapt.
You're going to have to bear with us. Because we
sweat it out.
Talk about this being a studio, but it's actually just my office. Yeah,
which happens to be our studio.
It does.
Yes.
Yes, we could sweat it out.
That's right.
For one episode.
So as you think about what lies ahead, as we think of seasons, we think of summer coming. What's our topic for the morning?
Our topic is thinking ahead about mission statements. This idea that, it sounds like when you hear it like that or you see it written down on our topics list, mission statements, it's like, what? We're gonna do a whole topic, our whole episode on mission statements. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But I think it's important to understand the value of them in the bigger picture, and not just the value of like a mission statement, but what values a mission statement is encompassing.
So yeah, talk with me. Bring somebody back who just heard mission statement and they thought of the word budget, or they thought of the word finance report. Corporate industry, yes. Bring somebody back.
Yeah. Well, the problem with that understanding of mission statements is it's kind of nonsense, right? Like, it's just jargon you throw on a wall to try and force a particular culture, and it feels a little forced or it feels fake, right?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, I'd.
Yeah. So, in my view, there's negative value in producing a mission statement like that.
So would it be fair to say that everybody should have one, as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think it depends on what you define as a mission statement. But again, I think the importance is the values behind it, more so than the actual physical thing you produce, whether it's a mission statement or writing a list of goals.
That's what I was just thinking the same thing. What makes a mission statement separate from goals? And if I'm hearing you correctly, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I'm kind of I typically tend to be a person who doesn't put a whole lot of rules behind things that you do to increase your discipline, increase your, like, if you're doing something beneficial, like, it's okay if you don't get hung up on whether it's a mission statement or you just write a list of goals. Either one of those things are going to help you, and you can iterate over time.
Sure.
But does that make sense? So
yeah.
But in terms of what a mission statement actually is, it's more of a story. It's more of an idea, a story of a picture. if you will.
Sure.
Of someone that you would like to see in the future, the version of you that you'd like to see in the future. And in cases of corporations, if done right, a mission statement embodies the values of a corporation. And you see those values in every interaction with your bosses. You see it in your paycheck. You see it in the benefits. You see it in when someone's sick, how that gets handled. You see it like when someone's doing poorly and how that's handled and how they're encouraged or not. And you see it how replacements come in. You see a corporation's values in almost every interaction with that corporation, especially as an employee. And a mission statement is meant to embody those values. It's meant to say, here's our story based on those values.
Sure.
And so it's basically saying, we are the kind of corporation that does this in this way and for these reasons.
Sure.
And it's kind of like a goal, but it's more of a, like I said, more of a development of a character than
a corporate character.
Yes.
And even that corporation is made up of individuals who would share that vision, if you will. Not necessarily, but that desire to change their own personal character to assimilate.
Right. And I think, again, if a company does it right, they're not going to get everybody, because not everyone's going to have the same values as every company. I mean, that's ludicrous, right? But if they do it right, you can attract the kind of people that will align with your values, and you'll be successful. They'll be successful because you're in the same boat, so to speak, right? You have the right people on the bus, and ideally, on the right seat on the bus. And I think about, like, my company. We talk about our company values all the time. I work for a company called Automotive, and I've worked for quite a few companies, and this is, I think, very highly of this company. And the reason is they have values, and they stick to them. And if you put all their values together, it would be what I call their mission statement, because it's just 5 basically rules, values. The first one is we put people first always. The second is we do the right thing every time. The third is we fight for customer success. 4th, we commit to excellence by paying attention to details. And 5 is we labor for simplicity. And again, if you put that package together, to me that's a mission statement, right?
Sure.
It's a definition of a character that we want to be, or that we want the corporation to be. And the reason that I enjoy working at this company so much is that they truly do embody those principles. And I happen to agree with those principles in almost every way that they facilitate them within the corporation, which means there's alignment, which means there's integrity, going back to that concept. Not like we're super moral, but that there's a structural integrity with the company, because all parts, for the most part, are aligned. Now, it's not perfect. But
no, and it's funny you bring that second one. We do the right thing every time.
Yeah. That one's an interesting one.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And I would, it's like, it can almost sound arrogant.
Yeah. Yeah.
That we do the right thing because that's who we are. And yet it can, the other side, if you will, the continuum is we have to wrestle with that at times.
Yeah. I would say that one's a sticking point more than the other one, simply because what is right in each circumstance. Sometimes what is right for the corporation itself, because it benefits us. It increases our bottom line, which means everybody wins. In a corporation of 200 plus people, all, the tide is rising and all boats are rising, right?
Sure.
Sometimes we flip the script, and you can see that we fight for customer success is the next one down, and we put people first as the first one. Like, sometimes the script is flipped and the right thing is for the customer. Like, but the right thing, that can be a fuzzy one.
Yeah.
But it's still a helpful paradigm, because it's like, well, we could do this lesser thing and kind of cheat the thing in whatever that answer is, whatever that solution is, or we could do the right thing. We know what the right thing is. Let's just do that now instead of this Band-Aid fix or whatever. So it's kind of meant to be more of like a, don't shoot for a lesser goal, but shoot for the right thing,
No, I hear you. And I think even as individuals, we can often wrestle with that.
Yeah.
knowing what the right thing is. But yet it's going to cost us more. It's going to cost us more time. It's going to cost us more whatever materials. I'm thinking of from my perspective, you know, in a construction world, you know, it's like, do I fix that thing correctly or do I put a Band-Aid on it that says, okay, that will look good from the surface?
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm as you and I are discussing. You know, you're talking about it from a corporate entity, and yet so much of this can be brought back to the individual as well. And I guess I think of that even from, you know, some of our listeners and people who have said, you know, we enjoy it, you know, and because not everybody that listens to this podcast is in a corporation,
right? Yep.
And so I'm thinking about it. It's like, and I think for me, I'll admit, it hasn't been till probably in the most recent years that I've been elbow to elbow or shoulder to shoulder with you enough to recognize that, you know, if I may, that beginning with the end in mind type thing, to be able to have a story that you write in hopes of that becoming the story. Because I'm not there yet. And so I think that's where the mission statement comes in. And you had another
So,
analogy.
you know, you mentioned begin with the end in the mind, which is, you know, one of the 7 habits in the 7 Habits for Highly Effective People book by Stephen Covey, which we may have referenced before. I'll reference a million more times on this podcast. I'm sorry. Just read the book and you can stop listening.
We can put
at least stop listening.
We need to put that on the link at least.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, you can remind me that. Later,
I will do so.
Yeah, but he talks about beginning with the end in mind as one of the chapters in his book. And you also said we're talking about corporate mission statements, but it can also work on a personal level. And that's really what that chapter is about, is kind of the personal mission statement. And his whole point is beginning with the end in mind. And so one of my favorite parts of that chapter is the very beginning. He walks us through this kind of mental exercise. He says, you know, picture that you're in a church and you're walking up the aisles. And as you do, you notice people are a little bit teary-eyed. Some people are sobbing, you know, and you're just walking up the aisle and you're paying attention to who's there. Oh, you know, Uncle Bobby's here. That's interesting. And get closer to the front, or you realize, oh, this is more of my family. And of course, as you walk up to the casket, you know, you look in and guess what? It's you. You're dead. And you just happen to be looking in on this funeral situation. And he says, as you walk back out the back door and past all these people, what are they saying about you? What do they think about you? What is it that they have in their mind that you were as a person that they're now kind of bringing to the surface here in this event? And does it align with who it is that you want them to think you are, right? What are the things you want to hear from them? What are the results you want to have at that point in your life that would be part of what they, you know, embody? And he's saying that is beginning with the end in mind. That is saying, look to that place and figure out how you can get there. Figure out what it is you want to be. And that is your mission statement, right? Like,
sure.
And even, you know, we were talking about this kind of corporate, well, the values. We were talking about the values. And it's not, I would say it's not quite far enough to say that's a mission statement. Because when you say, well, what is the right thing? What determines that is who the character you want to be in your mission statement, right? Like,
sure.
I want to be a successful businessman who, you know, makes X amount of dollars and whatever. Well, then the right thing might tilt towards the business side of making sure it's profitable. If your mission statement says, I want to be a man of integrity, you know, man who people look to and say, that guy is trustworthy. And they, you know, at that point at my death, they say, you could trust him with anything. And if you ever needed advice about the right thing to do, like, they would come to that person, right? If you wanted that picture, then that would, you would describe that in your mission statement. And
Sure.
then when your value is we do the right thing every time, it's a little bit clearer about what that looks like, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Your values can align with that character, the persona that you've built. And, a mission statement can be, like I said, a paragraph, 8 paragraphs,
Sure.
2 pages. Like, it's a story, essentially. And however you can develop that into a package that is memorable, referenceable,
Yeah.
usable, then you can begin to operate on it, And
Yeah.
even the smallest things.
And I think it's interesting. I think as you were sharing, the businessman that wants to make it profitable, and the person who might want to live a life of integrity. We're not saying those two things have to be separate,
Right.
Right. And I think part of that, I think at times we can almost separate those. Well, it's just about the business. I have to be, but I think there is the ability, in our design to be able to say, no, sometimes I have to take a loss to be able to be more marketable, if I may use that terminology. You follow me? In a sense that says, yes, it would be better for me as an individual and as a company to do that right thing, even if I have to take a loss. And long term, that will probably serve me better than just having a single-minded aspect of profit is my number one energy.
Right.
You follow? And I think that's, I was thinking about it so much with that casket type moment. Go ahead. I see.
I want to hear what you're saying.
Well, no, I was thinking about it from that casket type moment, as far as how that would impact our daily decisions. You follow me in that that sense of, okay, who do I want to be, and what am I doing in this very moment that is counter to who I want to be? And I think that's where it comes, that's where, for me, the mission statement becomes personal.
Yes.
And any individual, 13 something to 73 something can basically still adopt that dynamic. And I think, we have these aha moments in life that basically challenge some of our paradigms, if you will.
Right.
Someone who might have just found out they have cancer, someone who just found out they're expecting, all of these little big situations can tend to affect how I view what matters.
Right. Yes.
And I think those are part of the things that help us shape, or can help us shape that mission statement. And
they're also the things that can knock us askew without mission statement, without that beginning with the end in mind. It can be, you're 19 years old, going off to college, say I'm going to be a world-renowned architect, and then by 20 your girlfriend's pregnant, and you're now figuring out life through that lens, and that North Star has been shifted, right? And it's I'm not saying that in real life that doesn't have to affect the dream. It just obviously is going to cause a whole different set of circumstances and paths that you have to take. But it does not have to offset that if that is your end in mind.
Sure.
The problem is when we don't articulate those things and when we don't define those things, it's easy to go, well, I guess this is where I am now. And someday I can get back to that. But now your vision is skewed over here. And I think I was thinking about another really good book called Principle of the Path by Andy Stanley. Another link we got to put in there.
Sure.
It's such a good book, and it's essentially the beginning with the end in mind as a book. But he talks about exactly what you said, which is when you know where you want to go, you see the destination in the distance, you've marked it, you've plotted it on a map, then you can look down at your feet right now and say, are they pointed towards that? Right?
Yeah.
You can look down and say, is this next step in that direction, or is it, askew, or, and even when you have to take some pit stops or side streets or whatever, like, again, going back to that situation where you have a girlfriend who's pregnant, you have to figure out how to deal with that situation, that doesn't have to change the destination, but you might have to take a pit stop. You might have to whatever.
A detour.
Right.
In that direction.
Right. And so then those steps off of that path are intentional. And that's very important, right? To be able to, it comes back to proactivity. It comes back to a lot of those principles that precede beginning with the end in mind. But basically, I have the power to choose how I deal with this in order to maintain that vision, maintain that mission. I don't know. It's very good. And then, you were talking about profit and corporation. And just so we're clear, there's nothing wrong with profit in corporations and that being a goal or whatever. I think that a lot of shrewd businessmen, I know a lot of shrewd businessmen that I respect. And even Proverbs kind of talks about like shrewdness, right? Like, I think there's value in that. I think that's not a sole value that anyone should operate on, or just like, many other values shouldn't be the sole value, But I think in a properly packaged mission statement, having profits be part of that, or having a successful business or whatever, can be very beneficial. But when you just only think about profits, it can tend to,
when it becomes a single-minded focus.
Right.
Sure.
Then it can be potentially be problematic, right?
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. You just made me think of that when you're talking about the profit minded. It really kind of comes down to, that's not necessarily a full-blown character you've developed. It's just one goal, one thing, and it can become problematic, because in chasing a single goal and getting to it, you could find that, wow, I'm so far from the path to be who I want to be.
Sure.
And that happens a lot, right? Like in corporations, or even like, it doesn't have to be corporations. It can be a guy who intended to go to college or whatever, and then, and now he's working in his dad's whatever shop, and he's unhappy or whatever. And it can be, I was chasing something.
Sure.
Right? Whether it's profit in the scenario of a guy who got really successful, lost his soul, that kind of idea. Or it's the guy who intended to be the world-class architect, but now he's working in the basement of his parents' whatever, wishing he could have been that and not. You find yourself so far off the path. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and it's almost disheartening to hear you talk about that, but yet I know that's where people find themselves on a daily basis. And so that's where I would say, speak to that person who had the vision, the architect, whatever it was, and somewhere along the way, like you said earlier, they got derailed. Life happened. And so the mission statement, if you will, has become this resented thing because it's tainted, if you will. I had one of those once, and look where it got me. I had goals. Yeah, you think of it, and I think of it in the context of, possibly that bitter older person that says, "Yeah, I had goals once." Dream your dreams, but this is where you'll end up. You follow me? And so speak to that sense of hope, because I do I have bought into this vision, if you will. I'm working on it for myself personally, but I do think that end in mind, and I think there is we can run into that bitterness of people who have sought the goal and missed. And therefore, we hear that resentment, and you get the idea. It's just so,
think about how common of a trope that is in movies.
Yes.
Right? Like the guy's down and out.
Yep.
And he missed his chance or whatever. And the redemption story and how, I mean, essentially, the dream is never dead till you let it die. That doesn't mean, sometimes it means, sometimes dreams die because they're meant to. Right? And there's not, like, for instance, going back to the architect dreams of that, maybe you won't ever get to that dream you had when you were 19.
Sure.
You might never be that world-class architect. But it's arguable to say that that was even the right mission statement, that was even the right beginning with the end in mind, and it doesn't even matter. Like, that moment's gone. What is it that you want to be when you die now? And adjust accordingly.
Sure.
Because the cool thing about the principle of the path is it doesn't matter where you are around in the path, right? Like anywhere in this world, you can still point out the destination and say, I want to get there. And start heading that way. No matter where you are, you can start heading that way.
Well, and I think you're bringing up a great point, and I think so much of what we're fundamentally talking about is character. Because I do think, if we're just talking about dreams and goals, age factors into that so much. When you still play basketball, but at a certain age, I might dream of being an NBA star. Right. You follow me?
Yep.
But yeah, I recognize that I don't have that talent at that level. And that comes later on in life. And I think, what we're talking about is something that is probably developed more through time as I interact with the world and I experience things. And what do I want to be about? Not just what do I want to be doing, not what do I want to do, how much do I want to make? Yeah. And I think, we've, even from an occupational standpoint, that has motivated a lot of our, thoughts. What job can I make good money at? Or, versus, okay, what do I really want to be about? What passions do I have? Yeah. What talents do I have, innately, if you will? What have I been designed to do? And I think taking those things into consideration is also tremendously helpful when I am formulating, if you will, this mission statement. Go ahead. I see the gears.
Yeah. This is what happens, guys. Mark says so many interesting things, and it just triggers my brain. And I can't. Just waiting.
That's why I give you the time. I see it, and it's like, okay, time for me to stop and go.
But everyone else is like, stop. We want to hear what Mark was saying.
That's not true. Mark's done.
No, it's all good.
In that process, it was developed over time.
So I started out by saying how it's done, and the details aren't as important as just do it, But now we're to the point where we're talking about actual pedantic differences, and it does matter. Like because again, for me, it's about iteration. But I think once you're into it, the differences really matter. And what you're talking about is goals versus persona, goals versus the character that you want to be. And if you define the character you want to be by the goals, by the things you want to accomplish, that can be problematic, right? Because it's like, well, now I can't be that person because that opportunity's gone. I can't go to the NBA now, so what the heck am I? I'm nothing. Right?
Sure.
And that's problematic. Like, we should be separating goals and those things. So basically, it's like, I want to be a person like this, who looks like this, who when this situation happens does this. And then we can say, once we have determined and affirmed what that looks like, now we have a framework to build goals off of. But to say, does this goal align with that person? Well, great, let's write it down, let's start working on that goal. And if we don't hit it, it doesn't change who that person is.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And it's interesting because I think when I'm thinking about what you're saying, what comes to mind is when we are sometimes out to the property, my wife Chris she'll talk about, okay, that's the tree where the grandkids swing goes. You follow me?
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's nothing again, you know, about our kids. That's nothing about pressure to our kids that they have, that's what comes to mind. Whether they do or whether they don't have grandkids someday, we're thinking about, or my wife, I should say, is thinking about, you know, that's where it goes. That's the end. And we want to live our lives to be able to develop a legacy, if you will. And that's what I hear in that. And it's like, so when I'm thinking about that end of life experience, you know, and yeah, I'm thinking about, you know, that impact. And how do I want, you know, my grandkids, what do I want them to say about me? You know, what do I want them to say about my character? You know, that's what comes to mind in me. And, you know, it's like, so when I stop and think about, okay, that small aspect of that's the tree where the swing goes, you know, it incorporates all of those other characteristics of who I want to be. And I think for me, that's what a mission statement is. You know, the swing set tree is a representative of a desire to build family relationships. And how do we do that in a way that has an impact over time? You know, that because it's, you know, it's like, and I think that's where age factors into that, you know, because I think it becomes more important. Character can become more important over time. That's not to say that 20-somethings don't have character. Don't hear that. But, you know, it's like what becomes important is developed over time, I think, to a certain degree. And I understand that, you know, certain people are going to hear that and they're going to agree with me and say, yeah, I understand exactly. I'm about 50 and I'm starting to think that way, or even more so. And I think that's where that whole, and I think that's part of the dynamic that makes the mission statement, as I understand it, that character development within me more important. Because it is about being able to have, you know, reciprocal relationships and being able to invest in people, invest in my own family, and even invest in other people's families to where they can develop their own sense of legacy. And how do I want, you know, this,
Right. Yeah. And that's part of your mission statement, right? Like the unwritten one, the one that we're writing right now on this podcast, is this idea of disseminating legacy.
Sure.
And I can't wait till we talk about Sparrow's Nest.
I will look forward to that as well. That's a little teaser.
Yeah, a little teaser.
Yeah.
Well, what Mark's got going on, but yeah, I mean, when I look at it from
it's Sparrow's Rest, by the way. Sparrow's.
That's what I said. No, that's a good point. It's funny because when you were talking about the swing, I kept picturing. I'm like, oh, she's building her nest, Chris. You know, it's not a nest though; it's rest. I should fix that typo on my document.
It's all good.
But no, just thinking about like that. You just described essentially what I see in you and Chris, and what I see in your dreams is. Like, again, just disseminating legacy, which if you don't put that in your mission statement, I mean, I don't know what you're doing, but just get it.
It's not going to get a passing grade from Justin if I don't have that in my mission statement. Yes.
Yeah. That's really good.
No.
I just lost my thought.
It's okay.
It happens.
It does.
I only have thoughts when you talk. So.
Well, and that's okay. I can talk. But so take us into a snapshot of the difference between Justin's corporate company values and Justin's personal character values. Are these yours? Is the company, I respect it, but then what are do you have separate ones as part of your personal mission statement? Well, and what might some of yours be?
I don't actually. Well, I have a mission statement.
Okay,
written somewhere. Yeah.
I should ask that question maybe before we got on this
How
topic.
embarrassing, Mark. No,
Justin
actually,
really doesn't have a mission statement.
I have it. I got to be honest and say I don't reference it as often as I should.
Okay.
I definitely have one in my head.
Yes,
and I think
and
you do too.
Right.
And I think almost everybody does.
Sure. Okay.
I think the value of writing it is, basically making it concrete in a sense,
Sure.
but it's not concrete, it's paper, which means you can modify it, you can
Sure.
change it. So yes, I do have a mission statement. I think the question is the difference between my company's corporate values and my personal values.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons I like this company is their values I agree with. Now,
Sure.
the practice of how those values play out are very much going to be filtered through my values, right?
Right.
Integrity is one of them, and we've talked about that, and like that's become something very valuable to me, is to be the same person everywhere. So if I can't be who I am in a corporation, in a company, then I look for the exit. I'm saying, okay, that's fine. This isn't my company, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So integrity is a big part of that. And, we talked about integrity at length, but it's not necessarily saying you guys don't think righteously and therefore I can't work here. It's about saying, are you real? Are you connected? Are you connecting who you say you are with the results that you're producing?
Sure.
And that is just, I would argue, go so far as to say almost a non-negotiable for me. Like, if I don't feel like the persona that we're building matches what we're producing, and I don't have the ability to correct that dissonance, right? Like the difference.
Yep.
If I don't have the opportunity to speak into that and to work to connect those two, then it's not a good fit for me. I can't. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to stay in that situation.
Sure.
For me personally,
Right.
And I don't think that necessarily means everyone should be like that. I think sometimes you can go to work every day, work for the man, quote unquote, and still maintain your integrity and who you are. But that's for me one of the things, right? Is integrity. Yeah, and then in terms of how my other values that
for you personally,
a big part of what I value is, all the things that are encompassed by Celebrate Recovery, being able to be involved in that ministry of a similar nature, of being able to help broken people, being able to walk alongside and put my arm around the shoulder of people like me who are broken. And again, where does that align with the corporate values? I would argue if I work at a corporation where that is cut off and unable to happen. So in other words, if I traveled a lot, it might be an example, right? Or I don't know, or maybe a corporation that was completely against any kind of Christian ideals or principles and like persecution, that kind of thing. I've never experienced that in my life. Most all the companies I've worked for have been very friendly towards me and my beliefs or whatever. But that could be something where they would disalign. But I don't know. Does that begin to start to answer the question? I think there's so many. Like, you can talk about that a long time and go a lot of different directions. So it's kind of hard. Oh, family is another one. So, yeah. So I think, working at this company, one thing I really love is that there's not an expectation to work 60 hours for your 40 hours that you're paid, right? Now, there's crunch times that occur and whatever. It's a normal company. But that's one thing that I value in some of the companies I work for, is that they value family. And so if you have to take a kid to the dentist, like we had to take Joseph to emergency dental surgery Monday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he woke up with a basketball on his cheek on Sunday.
Right, I remember.
And had an infection and all that. And so we had to get him into the dentist. They took 2 teeth out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. Which apparently it wasn't because of anything bad on his part in terms of brushing teeth. It was just they put caps or something, and sometimes infections can get behind them. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
It's outside my expertise and not what we're talking about. But the point is, when those moments occur, I know my company will not look down on us for stepping out for a minute or say, hey, I have to run over there and help my wife get him into the room because he's, a little bit tipsy as he's walking into the room or whatever. So that's very valuable to me.
Family first.
Family. Yep.
God first, family.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's where I'm at. Is I respect the fact that we can have this conversation about corporation, and yet, that's one end of the spectrum, and we can recognize there are a bunch of people, who don't necessarily work for the corporation, who might listen to the podcast, and yet, that doesn't mean that a mission statement is not important for them as well.
I would argue it's more important
if
you're in a situation or a company or whatever that doesn't align with your values one way or another. And again, I don't want people to hear that and think, my company doesn't have Christians as their founders or whatever that is. That's not. I'm saying, like, if you feel like your values have to be compromised to work there, and again, I don't mean you have to steal from people. It could be like, I have to work longer than I should.
I hear you.
And I can't get to my family's events.
Sure.
Can't take my son to soccer. Whatever. Like, that might be, like, hopefully is a value of yours or whatever. Or maybe you don't have kids and the values are different. But the point is, if you're in a place where you can't reconcile your values with the place that you're in, whether it's work, school, church, family event, like whatever,
right,
then I would argue a mission statement is just as maybe more valuable to you to determine your path out, to determine the steps that you take on every day. And personally, I can speak to that because I remember talking to my good friend Dave Paletti, and he'd be happy to hear, have us tell this story. But he and I used to meet for accountability maybe about 10 years ago.
Okay.
More than that. This is about 12, 13 years ago. I don't know. And we met at the coffee shop, and we would talk about things. And at the time, I was a house painter. And I hated it. I hated just the grind, and it's a dirty job, and it's meticulous. And I had to work through my own kind of hate of that and kind of come to this place of, like, acceptance and contentment. But it still was just like a ground level thing of, like, this doesn't align with the person that I really want to be, which, I could go along. You can be a painter and still be a good, the person you want to be. But
it wasn't for you.
It wasn't for me. I wanted something different. I wanted more for me. And again, more is relative. I'm not saying paintings. I just needed something different. And,
fair enough.
So in this conversation with Dave, he told me a quote. I don't know where he got it, and he might have made it up on the spot. It doesn't matter. It worked. He said, experts are somebody who spent an hour a day for, 2 years, right, to learn a thing, and you become an expert. He's like, an expert doesn't mean a whole lot. It just means you put time in,
Get your 10,000 hours. So.
Yeah, exactly. Or in this case, it's not 10,000. It's like 350 years. The point is that the barrier to entry to becoming an expert in a thing is not as high as one would think. But it's just time. It's experience. It's putting in. And I took that to heart. I was like, you know what? I may be a house painter, but I can spend an hour a day reading about design, like working on a website, like doing these little things on my own time to develop a skill set, right? That I already had, but to become an expert, right?
Sure.
Because once I'm an expert, I should be able to get hired. I should be able to sell websites to people. An expert can do more than what I can do.
Sure.
And so I started doing that. I put the time in. I started volunteering at the church, doing their website, their graphic design stuff. And, whatever. The rest is history. Good, happy ending. Like, I'm in my career trajectory has gone really well. A lot of that just has to do with grace. But I will say that putting in that time resulted from saying, I want to be that kind of person. An expert, right? Let's use that word. And I want to be an expert in web development. And therefore, every day I could take steps towards that destination.
Sure.
And I think that's all wrapping it back to this thing is that's possible on any given day in any given situation. You could be in a place you don't want to be, but that doesn't mean you can't start walking away from that place.
Sure.
But it takes intentionality.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good summary of what this is about.
Yeah. That's a great, and I think of it in that sometimes we, a 2-degree difference.
Yeah.
Over time, ends up in a completely different place.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're at. It, our desire is to say, okay, for that person that may not be where they want to be, that doesn't mean that's where you continue to have to be. And there are choices, there are options. Sometimes it may not seem it. There may not seem as accessible as what you described 12 years down the road. But,
Right.
ultimately that option is still available. And, for us, I think it's our desire to encourage anyone, to develop that mission statement. What do I want with God's grace involved? How do I, what have I been designed? What gifts do I have? What am I passionate about? I think, that's the passion is another, a word comes to mind is holy discontent, like Moses. What are the things that make you angry? And be not mad, but in that sense that you have a passion about them. And I think, that's a key to unlocking that mission statement to a certain degree is what, was I designed to do and what do I have passions for? And in some ways working towards those to be able to do that more. So like you say, that's so thanks for sharing, Justin.
I got one other thought.
Go right ahead.
Maybe
Wrap it up if you want.
All right, let's do it. I was thinking about GPS.
Sure.
You mentioned 2 degrees difference, right?
Yeah.
And like the interesting thing about that, like if you look on a globe and 2 degrees, or you think about degrees on a circle, right? 360 degrees. 2 degrees different is not that different.
Yep.
Today.
That's correct.
Tomorrow, next week. 2 degrees for infinity is a different planet.
Sure.
Right? Like
yeah.
It's a completely, because it goes on and on and on and you get further and further and further and further. But the thing is with like a GPS is you plug in the coordinates, right? And then it says, go this way for a while. And you're like, that my destination's over there. Why are we going this way? Well, because we don't want to drive through houses.
Sure. There isn't a
trees
road
are in
straight
the way.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, I think about a boat. I've seen a boat GPS where it shows a line from where you are all the way off the screen. And it's just kind of this trajectory, right?
Right.
And you're driving towards your point, like especially on a lake or whatever. You don't have as many obstacles, but then there's a buoy.
Sure.
And so you have to turn, right? So, and that line, oh my goodness, it's like pointing 90 degrees away from where you want to be, but you know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
You're avoiding this obstacle, but your intention is still that point on the map. Like you're gonna course correct, right? You're gonna get back to that trajectory, and that's what a mission statement is. It's at that point in the GPS where no matter where your line is pointing right now, I'm going to get back to that, right? Like, I have to avoid this obstacle. Again, going back to that 19-year-old who's going to be an architect or whatever, like that was your point on the map. Well, guess what? If you don't course correct, you're going to slam into this dock.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And you have to slow down. You have to go around the curve. You have to endure the situation, right? Like now you have a baby, right? And that changes so much.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you can't swing that line back to match that, right?
Yeah.
It just might be a little bit slower going. It might be a little more difficult. Or we always can change that point on the GPS and say, I was going to go to my mom's house, but instead I'm going to go to my sister's house, right?
Yeah.
And recognize that was a good option, but this is probably the right option today or right now based on new information.
Yeah.
Right? We can change that. We can change our course. I think that's I think it's valuable to understand the flexibility and be flexible and understand that, but also understand the value of intentionality.
Yeah.
And how those things can work together.
And if I may, I think, the straight line, I think that can be the frustration.
Yeah.
Because, I just wanted to go right there. But there's something to be said for tides and wind that tend to shift us, and being able to overcome that and still make the course corrections that are part of the success, if I may, of achieving. It's like if all I ever did was walk straight towards something I want and I could pick it up and have it, I just there's no gratification in that. But if I really have to work at something, if I have to start with that first step, and it just makes the experience so much more rewarding. And it's not that it's a definite destination. I want to recognize this is a path we're talking. No one ever gets to the to the prize, I guess, but yet there are prizes that we acquire along the way through character. Don't get me wrong there, but it's like, is anyone ever have all the character? No.
Right.
And I think that's where I'm.
I mean, that's Paul. I press towards the mark of the prize of the high calling. And he's basically saying, I'm almost there, but I'll never be there, so I keep pressing towards the high calling. I mean, if that doesn't wrap this up, I don't know what does. That's what a mission statement is. It's defining the high calling that we believe that we have for ourselves.
Why didn't we start with that?
Because we ended with it.
Okay.
50 minutes and 47 seconds. It's a good time.
Yes, it is. This is how I see it.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Justin.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.